What is progressive rock? How can we define it? What bands and groups have played it, do play it, and still play it to this day? What is progressive rock? And we're going to talk all the way kind of through the history of it, starting off in the 60s, working all the way to today.
I've always liked a quote from Bob Dylan. The highest purpose of art is to inspire. What else can you do? What else can you do for anyone but inspire them? Inspiration is a shared gift. Like love, like music, it's a little human magic.
Lots of different music styles, music genres, and music types, and different bands have inspired the prog rock that we love. I cannot name every band. I cannot name every album, every song, every band member of any group that's even closely associated to prog rock. That is impossible. I looked some things up before I made this video, and it's mind-blowing what list the internet gave back to me. So I need your help. I'm not going to get it all. I'm going to tell you some of my thoughts, some bands that came to my mind. However, I want to know what you think. What do you consider progressive rock? What prog rock bands are your favorite? I'm Eric. This is the Loudboy Experience, and let's go.
Blah, 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 blah.
The top 12 prog bands of all time have generated like 750 million units worldwide. Truly impressive. You know, for a kind of a cult genre of the greater rock and roll genre, and then the greater music industry is prog rock, is progressive rock. And yet, 750 million albums and singles sold worldwide. So far, at the top of the list is Pink Floyd. Estimated global sales, 250 million units. This rivals the Beatles and Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley for global sales. Dark Side of the Moon, 1973, 45 to 50 million copies sold. Dark Side of the Moon was on the Billboard 200 chart for 950 weeks. 23 million copies of The Wall were sold. The Division Bell in 1994. Dark Side of the Moon, 1973. 15 million albums sold. The Wall, 1979, 23 million. So it's 23 platinum. Wish You Were Here, 6 million. Animals, 4 times platinum. Genesis, 100 to 150 million sold. Albums like Selling England by the Pound and Lamb Lies Down and Broadway. Invisible Touch, 1986. We Can't Dance in 1991. Very commercially successful. And then Phil Collins himself, 150 million units. So that combined with his band, 150 million on his own. And Genesis, the guy has sold close to 300 million albums between Genesis and his solo efforts. Amazing. Truly amazing. Truly, and he's a drummer. Gotta love that. Moody Blues. These guys incorporated symphonic elements so well. 70 million albums sold. Wow. Days of Future Past, 1967, one of their greatest albums. Long Distance Voyager, 1981, reached #1. In the MTV era, they had Your Wildest Dreams, which was a top 10 hit. Jethro Tull, #4, 60 million units sold. Aqualung is truly their benchmark. In 1971, selling over 7 million copies, reaching #1 on the US charts with Thick as a Brick. In 1972, A Passion Play, 1973. Jethro Tull beat out Metallica in 1987. Alan Parsons Project, #5. Estimated global sales, 55 million. Alan Parsons helped create and engineer Dark Side of the Moon. Eye in the Sky, 1982, and I, Robot in 1977. ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, 50 million units sold. Out of the Blue and Spectacle, the double album Out of the Blue, 1977, 10 million units sold. And then lots of hit singles. Unlike Yes, ELO generated sales through the relentless stream of hits like Mr. Blue Sky, Don't Bring Me Down, and Evil Woman. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or ELP, supergroup. These guys kind of the archetype of the supergroup. 48 million units sold. Unlike Genesis and Pink Floyd, who built their audiences over time. Rush, another example. ELP or Emerson, Lake and Palmer were successful right away. Pictures of an Exhibition, 1971, sold close to 1 million units, but then rapidly declined thereafter. Unlike Genesis and Rush, Emerson, Lake and Palmer were not able to kind of transition into the 80s. Rush, the cult band with a massive, giant following. 40 to 45 million units sold worldwide. Moving Pictures is the peak of that. They built a loyal following. Moving Pictures is their most successful. 5 million units of Moving Pictures, but also physical media. All of us Rush fans, we love collecting Rush. We've been talking about it just this last couple weeks with Grace Under Pressure. Even to this day, 40 years later, they sold out of the $300 Grace Under Pressure, and I'm sure the $375 box set will be gone soon. Rush. Styx, 30 to 54 million units sold for Styx. They had 4 platinum albums in a row. Grand Illusion, 1977. Pieces of 8, 1978. Cornerstone, 1979. And Paradise Theater in 1981. All of those triple platinum except for Cornerstone, 2 times platinum, 2 million sold. And then the power ballad, of course, you guys know it well. Come sail away with me. Yes, virtuoso. Man, I love Yes so much. 30 million units sold. Fragile in 1971 and Closer to the Edge, 1972, really put Yes on the map. They reinvented themselves in the 90s with 90125, their biggest sales spike in history with Trevor Rabin coming on board. Owner of a Lonely Heart, #1 hit single. Yes, they had a #1 hit with Owner of a Lonely Heart. Kansas, 30 million units sold. 1976 album Left Overture, their most successful masterpiece. 5 million units sold on that one. Of course, The Signal, Carry On, My Wayward Son. Point of No Return, 1977. Follow Left Overture with another 4 million units sold. Queensrÿche, 30 million units sold in between Mindcrime and Empire. Mindcrime in 1988 and Empire in 1990. Their best-selling albums globally: Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Genesis, We Can't Dance. Days of Future Past from Moody Blues. Jethro Tull, Aqualung. Alan Parsons, Eye in the Sky. ELO, Out of the Blue. ELP, Brain Salad Surgery. Rush, Moving Pictures. Styx, Paradise Theater. Yes, 90125. Kansas, Left Overture. And Queensrÿche with Empire. Let's turn the clocks all the way back to the dawn of human history. Come back with me now to the very beginning. Music, poems, writing songs were an expression of ourselves, an expression of the human race. And then more importantly, music in the earliest days was used to worship God. The Bible alone, the Book of Psalms, has 150 songs or poems written by many different authors, many of them written by King David. These are all songs composed to worship God. And then, of course, music was played in the courts of kings. Music then evolved and then became what we call classical music, chamber music, and then different sets of string ensembles. And then it became massive, and then it became an entire orchestra, right? What we know as classical music. And then working our way through the ages, jazz music came around. Jazz. So we have something as beautiful, extremely complicated, played and conducted by one conductor, where there could be 100 different people playing their instruments at one time, to, from Mozart to Beethoven to Chopin, all these different artists in classical music. But then we get to jazz, where improvisation comes to the forefront. The true expression of yourself through your instrument, maybe even through your voice with scatting and stuff like that. Jazz music. And then different parts of the world had their own forms of expression and forms of music. Since the dawn of time, we as a human race have found pleasure, satisfaction, and the highest calling for an artist is to express themselves through word and music, the actual music on the page, the music that we hear in the lyrics, so words and music. And then along the way, of course, the evolution came rock and roll, what we know as rock music. Starting off in the early days, and we go to, the bebop, and then we know through the 50s and then into the 60s, and we have Elvis along the way, highly influential. Of course, he was influenced by other forms of music. So we take jazz, we take classical music, we take rock. So what is progressive rock? Why is it progressive? Now, at the root of that word is progress. In life, you don't have life without progress. We start off, we're born, and we're an infant, and then we're a child and a toddler, and we grow up, we go through puberty, and we become young men and women, and eventually into adulthood, and then working our way towards maturity. And eventually we go back to the earth, right? When we give up our ghost, we are then buried, and our life cycle is over. So this entire cycle is progress, from baby to maturity, eventually to our end. That is progress. Let's look at the word itself, progress. I know, super nerdy stuff. Apologize, but come with me. Stick with me on this, because I want to know what defines it, because in that definition alone, in the definition of progressive rock, again, music in the old days was just pure expression. It was worship. It was used for and then eventually became a product. When music became a product, a commodity, something you can buy and sell, then we had to start really giving it definitions, right? And I've already mentioned classical music. I mentioned jazz. I've mentioned rock. I've mentioned several forms, but of course we got into R&B, and then we got into rap and pop music, and then all this different subsets through the 90s. You guys remember grunge, right? Grunge, a lot of that music was really good. A lot of that music still is really good. I remember when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out. Nirvana, that was a game changer. I was into those bands. Why wouldn't I? They were really good bands, from Nirvana to Soundgarden to Pearl Jam, and so on and so on. That whole, quote, Seattle sound, again, another label. So, of course, if you're like me, the progressive rock subcategory of rock in and of itself it's my favorite, right? And why is it my favorite? Again, let's go to progression. Think of that life cycle, right? Baby to maturity to the end. As music, as artists, as people ourselves, if you're not progressing in life, if you're not changing and evolving and becoming better, going towards a goal, towards excellent in your craft, in your artwork, in your life, you're stagnant and you might as well be dead. If you're not making progress, and I believe that's so of music. I don't care for these labels. I don't really like them. I just know that the bands we're talking about tonight, everyone, and believe it, the Beatles, through Yes and Rush, to in some more modern incarnations. I mean, Dream Theater's been around 40 years, but they're still out there playing. All these different bands, and there's a lot more here. Pink Floyd, all these different bands that you could really put into the progressive rock category. They have changed. They have evolved. They have kept changing along the way, seeking something better. The noun of progress, forward or onward movement. I just looked it up. I'm just reading it for you. Development, advancement, improvement toward a goal. A ceremonial journey made by a sovereign through it. I love that, through their realm, right? A sovereign meaning a king or queen. As a ceremonial journey, a progression, right? Again, the progression. That's a kind of different take on it. And then the verb, to move forward or onward, to develop, to advance, to improve, to increase in scope or severity, to make progress, to move forward in space, to continue onward, to proceed, to advance. You get what I'm going? It is, that is progress. It is movement. It is changing and evolving and becoming better. And really, I love this definition of progressive rock, because so many art forms out there, so many music categories, made so popular back in the 80s, pretty much the 80s, early 90s. We had those CD and tape, Columbia and so on, right? where you get all this stuff through the mail. Okay, again, long before streaming, but you can still buy them at the record store. But you guys remember like Columbia House. Again, when we had commercial radio and eventually XM radio, Sirius XM, you have to categorize. In life, we do categorize things, right? I don't go to the store and say, like I'm looking at the shelves, right? I really want some breakfast cereal. There, I'm going to get a box of breakfast cereal. Yes, breakfast. Wait, no, right? Categories. Do I want cornflakes? Do I want Rice Krispies? Do I want all brand? No. Do I want shredded wheat? Do I want Cheerios, Fruit Loops, and so on, Frosted Flakes? Categories. Breakfast cereal, and then I can choose which one I want. Same goes with music these days. Of course, it is music, but then we have our categories from jazz to pop to R&B to rock, and then, of course, and then subcategories, grunge, progressive rock, and so on to metal and heavy metal, and then death metal. Category. Now, we are talking about progressive rock tonight. Again, through the ages, prog rock has changed and evolved, which is so beautiful, right? Progressive rock does just do that. We want our artists that fall into this category, I want to go on them through their journey. The first Rush album is radically different than 2112, radically different than Moving Pictures, to Snakes and Arrows, to Clockwork Angels, right? There's progression there. There's change, the evolution to Grace Under Pressure along the way, where Rush sounds radically different from the first Rush album. Grace Under Pressure sounds different than Moving Pictures, and it sounds different than what came later, from Presto to Roller Bones to Counterparts to Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels. There was a progression there, right? Ups and downs, valleys, and different evolutions of Rush's sound. This is just one example. Yes did the same thing. When Raven came into Yes, they changed when they became so much more commercially viable. Think about Owner of a Lonely Heart. Huge hit. What's the difference between prog rock and regular rock, grunge rock, heavy metal? Labels, right? I never cared for them. However, if I had to choose a category of music, it would be what everyone calls progressive rock. Well, what is that? And I asked myself this recently. What is prog rock? What defines it? What bands play it? What bands started it, have refined it, made it what it is, and what bands are carrying it on now? What is prog rock? A lot of people will define it as, I don't know, long solos, virtuoso playing, fantasy lyrics, big stage productions, the use of folk, classical, jazz, and other forms of music intertwined with rock. There's lots of ways to define it. What happened to Alex Lifeson's arm? Well, nothing in real life, of course, but, well, hopefully not, right? I was under my desk working on some cables, connecting some things right down here. And I noticed something on the floor and it looked like part of a toy. I'm like, what is that? All right. If you guys watch my Rush collection videos, in the video that talks about bobbleheads, during that presentation, I have all my bobbleheads out. The ones that are just back here, there they are. He falls off right on camera to the floor. His head pops off. Yeah. I can't believe I'm showing this on camera. I just told myself, don't show him. Keep talking. And then I'm just like, frick, Alex is broken. I did not know until 2 days ago. I'm under this very desk and I noticed this on the, yes. We have to cancel the tour? Do we have to cancel the 50-something tour? Because Alex Lifeson's arm snapped right off. As you can see, it goes right here. I can put it back. And I'm going to have it glued back. I'm like, holy crap, Mike. Oh my goodness, that's Alex's arm. That's from the video. With the power and magic of movies, I'm going to have him pop back on the shelf right now. You ready? 1, 2, 3. And just like that, Alex is back on the shelf. Magic. No, it's called editing. What I love about music is the discovery element of it. A lot of us have discussed in the comments how when we discovered Rush, we then went on an exploration, if you will. We went on a seek and find mission to get all of the Rush albums. So whatever your starting point was, you start from there. For me, Well, it was 2112, but I discovered that in the late 80s, right? So then, I was in and around the time of Chronicles and Hold Your Fire. And of course, after that, we had Presto, Roll the Bones, Counterparts, and so on. So you start buying what comes out new, and those were exciting days, right? You remember when the Rush album was coming out, or whatever your favorite band is, that day when it came out, and you go to the record store. For me, I went to Newbury Comics, and I'd buy my albums there, and I'd buy my CDs there. And then you work your way backwards as well. You start collecting all the albums you missed because you just didn't even know the band existed or you weren't even born yet. Those were such exciting days, weren't they? Don't you guys remember? Again, you start here and then you start working your way forward. It's like time travel. And I'm going all the way back to Rush and then Caress of Steel, and I'm working my with Rush specifically, but I did this as well because I discovered Rush. It was only an organic, quick step over to discovering Yes, the band Yes. And dude, I was so blessed. In 1991, I saw Yes at the Great Woods Performing Arts Center, which is over in like Western Massachusetts, and to see this, the Union Tour. And what an amazing tour it was. Of course, the Union Tour had, the term Union was, there were multiple drummers and multiple guitar players and multiple keyboard. I mean, like, it was like this, it wasn't just like whatever the core five were at the time. It was, like 7 or 8 members of Yes from different eras and everywhere. It was amazing. And of course, they were supporting this album, the Union album. But yes, yes, I saw Yes in 1991. And that was great too, because I think my starting point was probably grabbing a greatest hits version, like classic Yes. And then I discovered all their previous albums and then worked my way forward through the 90s albums as well into some of the later ones. And of course, one of the albums that has been a big influence on me is called Keys to Ascension and Keys to Ascension 2. There are actually 2 of those. I love that term, and I have borrowed that term, and I call it Keys of Ascension or something like that for my novel. My novel is Artera, Erosus, or Arrow in the Keys to Ascension, because, again, I thought that was a cool little MacGuffin to have these multiple keys that could unlock another dimension that's in the novel that I'm writing. So, yes has been, I can say that over and over. Yes, has been a major influence on me. And also, man, I love Yes. Don't talk about them enough in this channel. I need to talk about them more. So I've seen them live. I have most, if not all, their albums. I now have maybe 4 to 5 vinyls that I've gotten even recently of Yes albums. It's been a huge influence on me. Yes is truly one of the greatest prog rock bands of all time. They even influence Rush. Their influence on the entire prog genre is undeniable and amazing. And of course, when Yes was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, just a couple, 3 years or whatever after Rush, Geddy Lee was on stage to play Roundabout with Yes. That was a mind-blowing melding of all my loves onto one stage. It was amazing. Yes, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Ged on bass. That was awesome. So guys, Yes Yes is just a massive band on my list. And if I had to name my top 5 bands of all time, it would go Rush, Yes, Dream Theater, and so on. And with those have kind of stayed those static 3 since basically I discovered Dream Theater. Those are my 3 favorite bands, Rush, Yes, and Dream Theater. There was a court case in 1965 in college. I studied 2 things. I had 2 majors. I got a business major in communications or film, TV, radio production, right? So I wanted to study business and TV, radio, film production. Because my goal was to work in that industry, right? But I wanted to also know business. So I got both majors. It took forever. And each major, though, had a law component to it. I had to study law, business law, and what we call communication law. And they're of course vastly different, both dealing with legal issues. But you should have seen my business law course had a book this thick. It was massive. I've never studied harder in my life. Never in my life. I was part of a study group. My entire law book for business law had tabs in it. where I could go to each chapter in each type of, judicial, legal type of thing. It was ridiculous and insane. But in my communication law class, we studied this court case because it had to do with pornography versus obscenity. What is legal, what is not? How do you define that? It was over and this was back in 1965. Okay, things were on the sexual front pretty darn tame back then. Right? Things have changed. Now on cable TV, it is shocking. It would blow the minds off of people from 1965. So they're studying a certain movie, determining whether the scenes in this movie are true, are they pornographic? Is it hardcore porn, or does it venture into obscenity? Now, obscenity can legally defined as basically illegal. And think of, I won't even go into it, but there is a difference between pornography and obscenity. So that's what this court case was about. Justice Potter Stewart, I'm reading from it right here. It was Jacob whatever versus Ohio, and it had something to do with the Roth test, whether it's protected speech and should it be censored. So all these questions were in play. Had to do with pornography, obscenity. Should we censor it? Is it freedom of speech? All right. So all of these things, okay, during this court case. But he came out with, this is part of his decision. I'm going to read it to you. I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description of hardcore pornography. Or perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it. And the motion picture involved in this case is not that. This is one of the most famous law quotes of all time. I know it when I see it. Meaning, we as people know hardcore pornography. We know it when we see it. When something's truly an obscenity or an obscene thing caught on film or in real life or whatever, we know it when we see it. Why am I talking about this? Why have I veered into an ancient court case talking about obscenity and sexual things and hardcore? Because I love that line, I know it when I see it. And I apply this directly to progressive rock. It is kind of hard to define. We can put big brush strokes across it. Kind of, we know who plays it. How you got me now? We know it when we hear it. You know the difference between an R&B act, a pop song, and rap, and a simple little jingle on TV. You know the difference between all those little subsets or those categories of music, and then you hear something that's progressive rock, and oh yeah, I know it. I know what that is. I know it when I hear it, and it always made me think of this court case. I know it when I see it. And that is, I think it's really a nice way to define this, right? Progressive rock, we just know it when we hear it. We know it when we see that band. These guys are prog. These guys are not straight rock. And it gets into that greater issue, and I want to go really far back to some of the very beginnings of rock and roll or rock. And of course, we had the days of Elvis and the crooners and that type of music. This where rock developed out of R&B and jazz and blues and turned into its own thing. And several artists like Elvis and such did that and helped form that, and the ground roots of rock were, but of course that came from much older forms of music, like I mentioned, jazz and R&B. Let's go way back to some of the most influential albums that you could definitely argue are progressive rock. Let's blast all the way back to 1967 with the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. This album was revolutionary, and I think it remains so. This album, of course, not only was an evolution of the Beatles, but of rock music itself. And really, most of the world holds it in that regard. I'm throwing it in with prog rock because this album is nothing short of mind-blowing. I've never been a huge Beatles fan. My wife is the huge Beatles fan. And since we've spent about 30 years together, I've grown to appreciate them, to love a lot of their music. I've learned so much about their catalog. But more importantly, I started listening to the Beatles. I didn't grow up listening to the Beatles. I went from basically top 40 pop I discovered Rush, and around the same time, actually before that, I discovered Living Color. That changed my perspective on things. But then I discovered Rush, and then I discovered Yes, and eventually Dream Theater. So these bands carried me forward and have remained so my favorite bands, of course. Along the way, though, my parents, though, loved the Beatles. Of course they did. They were the perfect age. In 1967, my dad was 17 years old, and he told me that he remembers buying the album, going back to his room with his best friend, putting the LP on the record player, the turntable, spinning that album, and his mind was blown. That's what it did, and that's what it still does. It is avant-garde, it is cutting edge. 100 different music styles are baked into it. Horns and classical music and different influences from around the world are in it. The production value of Lonely Hearts Club Band, it is ridiculous. And what's really funny, and this is a subject. That's really hard to say. This is this is a this is a subset of our discussion here. Is what is the influence that's used very literally here? What is the influence of drugs on so much great music that we've loved through the years? Of course, half the songs on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band are references to drugs. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Do you know what that stands for? Fixing a Hole and A Little Help from My Friends. All these things, these are indirect, if not direct, references to the drugs that they were experimenting with, they were taking, and you have to know it played an influence in the music, in the lyrics, in the production. And of course, I know they had some of the best guys behind the board in producing and running the whole show. However, yes, I definitely think that the references on this album are directly influenced the way the album was made. It was an evolution for them, an evolution for music, and of course, really one of the bedrock moments and the foundation of what we eventually knew and love about progressive rock. So when I say prog rock, progressive rock, I'm sure many different bands come to mind. Right away, you can think of some, right? Are you thinking of them right now? Bands like, of course, Rush, Yes, Genesis. But also, there's some bands that I want to challenge you to think about how they were truly progressive in their music, starting back in the earliest of 60s through the 60s, the Beatles. If you think about, like, I Want to Hold Your Hand, all right, I believe they played that on the Ed Sullivan Show when they came to America. The Beatles, the girls going crazy in the audience, and it was mind-blowing at the time. Speaking of mind-blowing, we get all the way and you get to like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. That album is by its definition progressive rock. And they themselves, as Beatles, as musicians, as songwriters, and working with their producer, produced mind-blowing music. They went on to do, of course, Abbey Road. And then the White Album. And by the way, this White Album has a misprint inside. And if anyone else there wants to buy some old copies of the White Album and this, my daughter owns these. I borrowed them to show you guys. But yes, these are available. Just drop me a line in the comments if you want to buy some classic Beatles albums. And this White Album is one of the misprint ones. So I know it's pretty, so it's actually a really cool copy. The Beatles, their music, how they wrote, and all the different influences in the classical little bits and the different time signatures, the different moods in parts of the songs, truly cutting edge. And I consider it really some of the earliest prog rock is when the Beatles evolved into that sound, and because they challenged themselves, they evolved, they made progress musically and lyrically, so much different than I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's so much different than that song, right? And then we get to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and so many other amazing songs in here. Like here's the actual album inside. You can see has the Apple core there. Yeah, Revolution right here. Man, that's a good one. Cry Baby, and then Revolution, Good Night. Let's see. I can't read them all, but yes, this is the White Album, which of course, if you've seen, of course, Spinal Tap, right? They had the Black Album. I love that so much. It's like, how much more black can it be? None more black. I love Spinal Tap. So good. All right. So yes, the White Album to Abbey Road. Now, Pink Floyd. Mind-blowing stuff. Dark Side of the Moon. One of the highest selling albums of all time. Pink Floyd definitely one. I wish I had a copy here to show you. One of the, ironically, right? They've sold, I believe, 23 million copies, at least in the US alone, of Dark Side of the Moon. And there was something else that came along with prog rock in the album era. Audiophile sound. Amazingly produced stereo albums. And you put that vinyl on, you've got your awesome speakers out here, and people would use it to tune their stereo systems, audiophile level recordings and pressings, and just the quality, and it fit hand in hand. We have these best musicians on earth making some of the best music on earth, and then it was just produced so well and then given to us in whatever form. Of course, along the way, that audio file kind of changed. We could play that at home on our amazing stereo system. We could have the cassette or the 8-track, and eventually we moved to CD. And of course, there's a reason why we still have vinyl now. We expect the best in our music, but that goes to the actual quality that we hear. The Moody Blues, I've seen them live, Melody Tent, back in the mid to late 90s. And man, that was amazing, by the way. My dad and I went to see Moody Blues. I've seen them live. And of course, this album, an amazing album by Moody Blues, Days of Future Past, with the London Festival Orchestra. King Crimson, another amazing, back in the 60s. Fast forwarding to Yes. I have Fragile here. Actually, I was going through my stuff earlier on my vinyl, and I have like 3 copies of Fragile. I think it's when my wife and my daughter, when they're out, a lot of times they'll drop by whatever little record store, and I give them, of course, the list, right, of what I'm, grab me some Rush, grab me this, grab me some Yes, and so on. And along the way, I have like 3 copies. So yes, Fragile. Moving up, of course, to 90125. All right. This album, an amazing album. It fits the 90s. It is an evolution of, actually 80s, I believe, is evolution of their sound. Yes, so highly. Jethro Tull. Of course, you guys know their lead man playing his flute along the way. And of course, this is Aqualung, one of their biggest albums on here. Aqualung. Oh, not that, beyond that, the song. Da, 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 da. I just messed that up, but love Aqualung. So good stuff. My dad introduced me to Aqualung, and I had no idea what it was back, and I was already like a Rush and a Yes, and probably a Dream Theater fan, and then he starts talking about Jethro Tull. I'm like, what's this? So I heard it, and I'm like, this is good stuff. This I would call prog rock. And then here's another, which one is it? This is Minstrel in the Gallery. All right. Gentle Giant, another influential in the kind of prog space. Of course, within progressive rock, we have subcategories, different types, and we're going to get to those. But right now, I'm kind of highlighting. So I don't have do I have a Genesis album? I do, because I took this out. No Jacket Required, amazing album. I like to play along with on my drum set with that. And my wife's like, "Can you play that do 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 in the air tonight?" Of course I can. But yes, Genesis. I have this album to show you, Nursery Rhymes, and another, because Genesis was prog. They were prog rock, and then they evolved their sound like so many of these bands did, and they became so commercially viable. And guys, we're going to go through that. How many albums they sold, all the different music but yeah, Genesis, huge in this list. Skipping to, of course, we talk about it a lot here. I mentioned it earlier, starting with a Rush album, getting to the seminal moment when Rush solidified who they were, what they could do lyrically, musically. 2112. And of course, our space pirates in the back with their kimonos. Yes, Getty, Alex and Neil, 2112. Another one, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the Alan Parsons Project, and ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. When I was asking myself, what is prog rock? What is and who plays progressive rock? I needed a little bit of help. I start poking around the internet. So, what do some other people think? Some people throwing them into the subcategory of rock and roll. And of course, yes, ELO did come up. So I thought I'd mention them here tonight. Another one that I saw poking around the internet was, of course, Styx. I have a couple Styx albums here. Most of these are for sale, not the Rush, not the Yes, but if you guys want to buy any of these albums I'm showing you, you can just drop me a comment. I'll ask my daughter how much. So yes, these are available, Styx. And believe me, this is not a video trying to sell you vinyl, but I did want to mention it because not too long ago, my daughter, entrepreneurial genius, that she bought 1,000 vinyl records, 1,000, and they're still in my dining room. So please, if you want to buy some vinyl, talk to me, and she might sell you some vinyl because I needed it. I mean, we haven't been able to use our dining room since this summer, last summer, and that's our gift to her. It's like, here, take this, 1/7 of our house, this room, and 1,000 vinyl records are in there. That's right, 1,000 vinyl records. Ridiculous, right? Kansas. And I think of some of the Kansas songs. One of my favorite songs of all time is Wayward Sons. All right. And if you used to watch Supernatural, which I love that show, Supernatural, they would use that for like the highlights of starting or ending a season. Right before the episode start, there was this cool video that they put together with all the highlights of that season. And it was Carry On My Wayward Son. An amazing song. Before we get into some more modern stuff and more kind of challenge the idea of what is prog rock, Queensrÿche. You guys might remember them well. What, late 90s, early 2000s? I mean, that they became more popular. The 60s had another band that came out of England, and that is Pink Floyd. And of course, you guys know of albums like Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall and Wish You Were Here. Those are just three that I can think of. And of course, Pink Floyd can definitely be thrown into this category with their exploration of music, with their thematic, basically concept albums, right? Which is another thing that we will talk about, are concept albums, wherein a band takes an idea and flushes out a story or a narrative or an idea over the entire set of songs. And some bands have done this most masterfully. And of course, we'll get to that band. It's Rush. Prog is still alive and well today, and thankfully so. For every Pink Floyd or King Crimson, yes, Rush. For all of these bands that have come before, new bands and bands that have been around a while but were influenced by that first generation of prog are still around today. Bands like Tull, Porcupine Tree, Liquid Tension Experiment, Steven Wilson. I throw Living Colour into this category. I love Living Colour. Are they straight prog? No. But their experimentation, their thematic elements, their mastery of their instruments, I do like to throw them in there. That's just my personal bias. Radiohead, throwing them in there. They've done some really avant-garde stuff. And then I want to mention three of my favorite guitar players. Can you really differentiate when you listen to their solo albums with the themes and the mastery of their instruments and the complex songs and the long songs? Eric Johnson, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. After songs from The Big Chair, Shout, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Tears for Fears went on to make some stunningly amazing and complex music. Some of those 90s albums, you cannot differentiate that from a lot of other prog music out there. Tears for Fears has done some brilliant work. Songs from The Big Chair is a stunning album. Is it prog? No. But they certainly ventured into that experimentation. The longer songs, the complex things, the different time signatures, the different movements. I'm throwing Tears for Fears in there.
I've always liked a quote from Bob Dylan. The highest purpose of art is to inspire. What else can you do? What else can you do for anyone but inspire them? It is gratifying to think of us having inspired these youngsters to pick up a pair of drumsticks, a guitar, a rhyming dictionary, and torment their parents as we tormented ours. Inspiration is a shared gift. Like love, like music, it's a little human magic.
Lots of different music styles, music genres, and music types, and different bands have inspired the prog rock that we love. One of those main ones is classical music. This is Tchaikovsky. And another Tchaikovsky. Brahms. From Mozart to others, classical music has played a huge inspiration. Just think about one of the staples of progressive rock are the long songs, okay? Not your 4 or 5 minute radio friendly. We're talking 20 minutes or greater sometimes, or just 10 minutes. Massive songs with complex arrangements and different movements. And actually a lot of these big masterpiece actually have the introduction, right? That where they the suite where they play all the different sections of the song like classical music does. Beyond classical music, jazz. Jazz is complex, lots of improvisation, extremely complex rhythms and time signatures. And my favorite sax player of all time is John Coltrane. And this is a Love Supreme vinyl of that. Another band that I've loved through the years is the Yellow Jackets. This is more modern jazz, all right? Kind of upbeat, more kind of the pop style, but man, very talented guys. Now, think about inspiration to all the guitar players out there. One name that rises to the top of any list would be Jimi Hendrix. Has inspired countless guitar players. The genius of Jimi Hendrix is undeniable. I saw this next artist once when I was in high school, and just off of Cape Cod, he was playing a small club, and somehow we got in, me and my high school friends, because I had lots of trumpet players as friends back then. And some of the best trumpet players, one of which is Tom, and he's now a music teacher on Cape Cod. But Tom, the only thing he wanted to do is hit that high C and the double high C and the triple. He talked about just playing really high. And this guy, Maynard Ferguson, is one of those great trumpet players in jazz music, and he was mind-blowing that night. He was older at the time, of course, but man, seeing Maynard live was amazing. Recently, we picked this up as well. I have a great Jimi Hendrix best of, and it's got Purple Haze and Fire and Wind Calls Mary, Hey Joe, all along the Watchtower. And it goes on in Crosstown Traffic. Great double vinyl of Jimi Hendrix. Another band that I truly love, and especially the song 8 Mile High. Some of their songs are, I mean, of course we have Hey Mr. Tambourine Man, but I'm talking about the Byrds. But they actually have a lot of really complex, really amazing music with, which is not prog rock, but it's kind of proggy. Man, I love the Byrds. Has inspired so many people. Now, these next two artists are similar in a lot of ways and are undeniable legends in music. The first of which is Billy Joel. This is Glass House. Just one of the albums has one example to show you here. Billy Joel, Scenes from Italian Restaurant. I mean, that is prog. Okay? He's not really a prog artist, but man, that song is mind-blowing. And I believe my daughter actually owns that vinyl, but I do have this one. She gave it to me. She had a spare. So yes, Billy Joel, amazing artist. Another artist that has inspired countless people. So creative, a genius, and he's passed on now, and we've lost him. But yes, David Bowie. And this is a double album. David Bowie. I have another one right here. David Bowie. Undeniable, the influence. This next band, one of the greatest bass players of all time, but a truly amazing band. I love these guys. We covered a couple of their songs when I was in my college band, and it's The Police. But The Police were a direct influence on Rush. Just think about those reggae rhythms. And he's actually name checked in one of the old interviews with Neil Peart and Getty and Alex. They mentioned The Police when they're kind of listing some of the artists they were into at the time, and you can hear it in Rush's music. And of course, here is The Police. I have another one right here. Love these guys. Synchronicity. I have a lot of their music on CD and digital. Love The Police. And speaking of, recently when I made my 40th anniversary for Grace Under Pressure video, I said, this is the one that I don't have. And then I'm going through all my Rush vinyl earlier, and boom. Older, kind of messed up a little bit. I mean, I got a tear right here. It's seen better days. Where's Alex? Where'd he go? My goodness. Between my broken bobblehead and this, Alex is not faring well in my Rush collection, but yes, this is Grace Under Pressure. And with this, and especially in Power Windows, a lot of reggae rhythms are introduced in just different sections or throughout. So the Police, big influence on Rush. This is Grace Under Pressure, and I do still want to get the re-release of this, and I'd love to still hear that remix that they're putting out. And which brings me back around to the fact that so many of us have shared, so many of you have shared with me that sticker shock with the 40th anniversary edition of Grace Under Pressure. Well, yeah, me too. $300, $375 for these massive collections. And my ask and my request to Rush is that, hey, please release Grace Under Pressure and the remix versions and the remastered versions individually. Let me buy the vinyl. Let me buy that Blu-ray. Let me buy what, and guess what? If they did that, if Rush decided, okay, yeah, we're going to sell you can buy this vinyl here and you can buy this Blu-ray here and you can buy them one at a time. Guess what? When we're going to the store and we're not having to pay out $300, and maybe we're only up to $30 or $40 and we're getting what we want, a lot of us might go, I'll take a t-shirt too. It'll actually work out really well with your sales. Rush, please consider selling the individual components. I understand if you sell out of these sets, that's great, great. But at some point, please let us buy just the vinyl. Okay, let us buy this individually outside of the massive, almost $400 box sets. My request to you, let's get a petition going and let's ask Rush to do this. Another band that's been really influential, undeniable, is The Doors. Okay, Jim Morrison and the boys, The Doors. Yeah, these guys, big influence. And that, like Billy Joel, is Elton John. So, I have been more and more through the years exposed to his music. My daughter's been a big component of that, and my wife has gone to see Elton John recently, and genius. I've heard, because I only knew like the ones that hit the radio. I only heard his music that were in movies, and then I was exposed to the deeper cuts. All right, and I got to hear the complex and amazing music that Elton John wrote. This is one example. This is a double album. Don't Shoot Me, Elton John. So yeah, between him and Billy Joel, I've only come to appreciate these guys more for their deep and resounding talent. In 1992, I got to see the Moody Blues live on Cape Cod at the Melody Tent. My dad went with me. Of course, my dad had been a Moody Blues fan long before I was even born. And when they were coming to Cape Cod, I'm in high school. Let's see, what year is that? I was probably a junior in high school, and we went to see the Moody Blues, and it was brilliant. It was amazing. And I had just discovered Moody Blues a couple of years before. My love of prog rock was evolving during those years. And of course, in those years, we were getting the 90s Rush albums, and I was heavily into that, of course. And around that time, I'm seeing Roll the Bones. Okay, but in 1992, I go to see Moody Blues. It was brilliant. It was amazing. But Moody Blues really falls into more, it's prog rock. It definitely is. 100%. But also, again, labels. I can't stand labels, but their use of classical music. So people have called it classic, rock or symphonic rock. And those terms are thrown around, but they're how they incorporated symphonic elements and orchestral elements into their music is just stunning and beautiful. And so they're taking rock to that next level. And that's what prog rock does. It doesn't just settle for a 4/4 beat where you have chorus, where you have verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, in, on out. You're right. The typical standard rock format. No, prog rock is about exploration. It's about thinking beyond the limits of what your genre is. And Moody Blues definitely falls into that category. This next band, we've spoken about quite a bit with one another. This next band is undeniable in their talent to build complex songs, their mastery and virtuoso on their instruments, great lyrics. They've been around for 40 years. Of course, I am talking about a band that I've seen numerous times now, twice with my sons. I'm talking about Dream Theater. And when I thought, we all thought that the days of Rush and being able to see them live were over, I told myself back in believe 2019. Yeah, 2018, 2019. I brought my sons to see the full Metropolis Part 2 Scenes from a Memory. We got to see that tour, and we were within spitting distance of John, so close on the right side of the stage, literally front or second row back. John Petrucci was right there. It was amazing. And then another time when we saw them play all of Images and Words for that anniversary, my friend Joel and I got to meet Dream Theater, and the boys signed my copy, my vinyl of Images and Words. You know, if I had to list my top 5 favorite bands, Dream Theater for many, 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 many years has been number 2. Goes Rush, Dream Theater, yes. Those are like my favorite. You notice they're all prog, right? These days, Steven Wilson has moved up into the top 5. So yes, all my favorite bands are prog bands. And speaking of progression, not only has prog rock advanced through the years and gotten better, and with each generation, and I'm not saying that the music has gotten better, you know, between this generation, but what I'm saying is we've only advanced the concept, no pun intended, of prog rock, and each band within their musical journey has only gotten better. You go from Images and Words, and then Scenes from a Memory, true masterpiece. But they keep going, they keep making great music, and of course, one of the more recent ones is Distance Over Time, which I love talking about this because, of course, we have Grace Under Pressure, and then this is Distance Over Time, which, of course, is Velocity. John Petrucci, being that close to him at least twice has been amazing. Meeting him in person, and when I stood in line with my moving pictures, the sleeve, the vinyl sleeve, and John Petrucci and Mike, before Portnoy came back, they both signed it. Before the security guy said, "Hey, you can't have 3 items." Well, but they signed my moving pictures, and I bring this up because John immediately said, "That's an amazing album." I could see the reverence in his eyes for Rush and for the Rush music. And it was so amazing hearing John Petrucci say that to me in person. So, yes, this is Terminal Velocity. Speaking of, this is, I believe, his latest solo album. Another band that was inspired by Rush. This band gave Rush, or presented Rush at the Hall of Fame when they were finally inducted, blah, 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 into the Hall of Fame, is Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl, huge fan, and Taylor Hawkins, may he rest in peace, another huge fan. Of course, at the Hall of Fame, they played 2112, and it was great with Nick, the producer from Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels. They played 2112. Matt, this next one is for you. Straight out of Canada, 3 guys form a band out of Toronto. Wait, it's not Rush? Yeah, that's right. It's Triumph. And in interviews, thank you, Matt, I've watched that documentary. These guys name check Rush more than once, and they know how important it was that Rush paved the way for rock music. Are these guys prog? No. But they definitely were influenced by and helped out by the success of Rush, by our little massive, massive, massive cult following. All of us Rush fans out there. So, this next band has been mercilessly made fun of through the years, and most recently, I hear it a lot. They make fun of the lead singer's voice. A lot of people just don't like jam bands, okay? The ones that are just jam on, think Grateful Dead. And this next artist, however, this album I consider to be a masterpiece. Dave Matthews Band, Under the Table and Dreaming. Songs like, there's like nothing bad on here. I don't care for Satellite. Okay, maybe there's one. But Typical Situation, Ants Marching, which happened to be a radio hit, Warehouse. These are complex. beautifully written songs, and their drummer is out of this world, bonkers amazing. But also the fact that not only do you have this amazing drummer holding down Dave Matthews Band, but with the sax on one side, the violin on the other, and I like Dave Matthews Band. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I like Dave Matthews Band. I really like this album. In my opinion, they didn't hold up the quality through the years. It was like from here. The next album was okay, but it was kind of a slide for me in quality. But this album is so great because Under the Table and Dreaming, Dave Matthews Band, I love because there's a freshness to it, like a live element, as if those five guys were standing in a room and just playing live together, right? No click tracks, no barely any overdubbing. That's the sound. And I know that producer, he kind of did that kind of work when they released some like other like Gray Street. I forgot what that released, but anyway, later on they released like some stuff that wasn't on this album. It had that same sound. They lost that. And I'm really bummed out that Dave Matthews Band, it's almost like Pro Tools ate them. All right, the Pro Tools monster came along and things were just overproduced. It lost that fresh live element, the spontaneity. And if you've listened to this, if you've truly heard this album, I think you might get where I'm going with it. So I will say right here, I love this album. Brilliant, brilliant album. This next band, I do consider to be modern prog rock. This next band constantly evolves. They surprise me with the type of music they play, how it's so much more than rock. And of course, I am talking about Muse. Three guys, straight out of England. Complex, dynamic, beautiful, hard driving. There's piano elements. I mean, like, this is Muse is stunning to me. I love Muse, and I haven't mentioned it before. And this next one actually had a hit many years ago, Starlight at Supermassive Black Hole. But when you listen to Map, hold on, there's another one, Assistant Nights of Sidonia, insanely great song, a long song, Muse. And then they went on, but not only that, is that they write concept albums such as Drones. Okay? This album's about living in a police state and drones and just the danger of living under such an authoritarian oppression and how people become drone-like, where they no longer question user intellect. They are now basically drones. Concept album, great, great album. A couple of the songs in here, he let loose, man, his guitar work, stunning, and holds up among some of the greatest guitar players out there. When you see them live, okay, check out some of their live videos. And I own several of them on Blu-ray. He is dynamic and amazing, and he's singing and he's running around. He's playing guitar. Plus, he's got this cool electronic like scratch pad on his guitar. Their bass player, amazing. And what that drummer does with so little pieces, right? Literally has maybe two cymbals, two toms, maybe a floor tom. Literally, there's maybe max 7 or 8 pieces. This is not your Neil Peart set. And the sound that he gets out of it, truly great. Love the Muse. Love the Muse. I've been a big fan for a very long time. Not too long ago, my dad showed me a video, an old concert of these guys, and you know what? I wasn't really impressed. I've through the years, I've only known them for Money for Nothing and the Chicks for Free. Of course, I'm talking about Dire Straits. You guys have heard of this album. It's a classic. It's a great album, but there is a lot more dimension, talent, and skill in musicality that I didn't know even existed. I just didn't know. I was ignorant of it. But also, these guys have inspired a lot of people. Dire Straits. These guys have influenced many, many different bands, so many different prog bands through the years. I'm talking about The Who. The Who has inspired so many people. And my goodness, I have several copies of their music right here. Another band, AC/DC, has inspired a lot of people. Not one of my favorite bands, not my favorite music. You know, I just don't care for them. But yeah, it's undeniable the influence of AC/DC. Come on, Back in Black. Of course, here's David Bowie. Man, a lot of these are kind of worse for wear. I love this song. And I found this vinyl, and it's not prog, and I'm not sure if it's truly, but this is one of the greatest songs of all time, Hotel California. What a great song, which is really almost prog adjacent, and just how amazing and dynamic and diverse. What a great song that is. This band has influenced a lot of the prog rock groups out there. It is Deep Purple. I've heard this band name checked many different times. This band, think 60s psychedelic. The lead singer, legendary. The Doors. How they incorporate the Hammond B3 organ into their music. Just beautiful. And speaking of AC/DC, this is Back in Black. And man, I remember this used to be the theme song to my like my social club thing, you know, my frat kind of thing in college, which really, I guess, is kind of appropriate. I do love black. As you guys know, it's all I wear. I mean, I'm wearing it right now. I'm always wearing black, but yes, I am black, and I'm Back in Black. I can't believe I messed that up. And Rolling Stones, huge influence on so many bands and so many prog bands. This next band, you could argue much of the success of Rush during those early to mid early years was attributed to this band. Not a big fan, not my kind of music, don't care for them, but I give them props for what they did for Rush. And of course, I'm talking about Kiss, and talk about messed up. Yeah, that's barely a cover anymore, but yeah, that's an Ace Frehley. This next guitar player, a legend in his own right. This is Jeff Beck. A cross section of my two favorite bands is this album cover. And I did want to show you again. This is my Moving Pictures original that I picked up in college. You know, I was in the communication, TV, video, film production department, and I actually had my own radio show in college because we had a radio station. I'm on the lawn of our school, right out there, and I'm in the radio department, and we're selling vinyl. But when I saw this in one of the boxes, there's no way I was letting it go. But of course, I got it for pennies on the dollar. Literally, it's like 50 cents. But an original Moving Pictures, okay, OG, but it is signed by John Petrucci and Mike Mangini, and also I put the two guitar picks, I believe from the R30, right? They had those guitar picks that were autographed by Alex and Getty. They're not real autographs, but I just love this, and this hangs on my wall. You can tell it's in a frame. But yes, this is just a cross section where I have Dream Theater autographs, an original Rush, and I just think it's a nice little thing to have on a wall. I have played classical music a good part of my life, being in like orchestras and different symphonic type of elements in school, stuff like that. I've played tons of jazz. I've done my own improv solos before audiences in different jazz bands from high school through college. I've been in a drum line. I've been influenced by so many, including church music. So many different types of music have helped mold my experience, my abilities, and who I am with singing and saxophone and drums and the different instruments and my own voice as an instrument. All these things have helped mold me, and here's why progressive rock is the perfect fit. Progressive rock takes in so many of these elements, and you may not always hear them. However, there's a legacy there. There is a history there that's baked right into prog rock. Because so many of these musicians, the drummers, the guitar players, the bass players, the keyboard players, the singers themselves, have started off with these other categories. So many of these musicians were in school bands just like me. They started at those ground roots when they were very young. And then eventually, in the best of them, and you could argue these are the best of them, went on to be in these prog rock bands, went on to master their instrument, but not only master, always seeking to better themselves, striving towards excellence as a band with their music, with their compositions, and their individual instruments, always seeking to go another step, to progress, to become better, to strive towards a goal of creating the very best music and writing the very best lyrics they can. That is what I believe prog rock is that constant striving towards this goal that's really unobtainable. Like, in life, none of us are perfect and none of us ever will be. However, I believe one of the true tenets of living a good life is reaching for perfection, constantly striving to become better people in our lives and live and be better people and to serve others, to be the best people we can be. So goes with music. With music, if you stop and you remain stagnant and you never change and you're writing the same songs over and over again, basically, then what are you? Let me ask you, what is that? Certainly not progress. No, that's death. That's death by not doing anything, by complacency, by giving up. Prog rock at its best is the best of us, the best of music and lyrics and songwriting and in mastering your instrument. And you think of your favorite prog rock band, and wouldn't you agree? That is what it's about. It is that progression, reaching for perfection, but reaching and striving towards excellence and being and evolving along the way and experimenting. And that is part of the journey. Just like in life, when we fail, the best of us learn from that. When we fall down, we learn how to pick ourselves up. When we fail, we learn, oh, I'm going to do that differently next time. I'm going to be better. And I'm going to do better next time. So as goes in life, goes with our musical journey. And I love that not only within each of these bands, they have gone through different eras and different music forms. And I mean, Rush is the perfect example. As you think of their different eras, you think, okay, they're trying this and they're evolving and they're changing. And then they writing different songs now, completely different. From Hemispheres to Moving Pictures, night and day. It's still Rush. It's still amazing prog rock. It happens to be a little shorter now. But as Geddy Lee said that he took everything he learned making a Hemispheres, making a 2112. And that educated him and trained him and taught him how to, now I can do this in 5 or 6 minutes. I don't have to do this in 30 to 40 minutes. I can do this in 5 or 6 minutes. A concise, compact, beautiful composition. And if you look at the sheet music to Tom Sawyer, it would blow your mind. 3/4 to 5/4 to 4/4 to 7/8 to, I mean, it's changing time signatures. Sometimes every measure, there's several different ones in a row. It's ridiculous. And so it's extremely complex, and yet there is a perfect thread of continuity of thought, musically and lyrically, that goes through each of these songs. And what that lets us do is listen and enjoy. But when you step back and you start counting it with your hands and you're drumming along, or you're playing your guitar with it, your bass, when when you start truly looking at the depths, like lifting the hood and like, holy crap, that is one amazing engine in this car. And yet it drives and purrs like a kitten. But underneath, it's just this massive beast of an engine, with twin turbo. You know what I mean? Like this amazing engine, and yet it drives really smooth and beautiful, right? And some of the best cars do that. They drive like a beautiful old Lincoln, just like a cloud, but underneath is a beast. I can't make this video alone. I want to know what bands you love. Why do you love them? And I love you guys for being here. I am Eric. This is the Loudboy Experience, and I better quit because my voice is giving out. You guys have a good one, and I will see you next time.